verse 2, and I want to take time with this because these are what is essential to being a Christian in the church in such a way that the church becomes one and its testimony is clear. With all humility. The Christians invented this word. Literally, the word means to think lowly of yourself. To think lowly of yourself. That is a far cry from the unconverted world's interest. In fact, no such word existed in classical Greek. Apparently, the Christians coined this word because thinking lowly of yourself was the last thing that Greek culture wanted to advocate as a virtue. We would be the same in our culture today as would be almost every culture throughout human history. You're supposed to think highly of yourself, promote yourself, because of course, in your fallen condition, pride is the default position of every human sinner. But Christians have come up with this by virtue of God's design and God's revelation, that we are to be defined by all humility. Not some, but all humility. This is the virtue of the person who is aware of his own unworthiness and weakness. In other words, to walk worthy, you have to recognize you're unworthy. And we're talking about humility. What are we talking about? Well, I think there are three things that would simply help you to see what humility essentially perceives. Number one, self-awareness. Self-awareness. A humble person is aware of his own limitations, his own boundaries, his own competencies and incompetencies, his own weaknesses, his own sins. Okay. Self-awareness. You start by being honest about yourself, and you hear Paul say, I'm the chief of sinners. Or you hear him say, I don't do what I want to do, I do what I don't want to do, I'm a wretched man. Well, Paul is declaring his unworthiness. So the worthy walk is a walk of one who is convinced he is unworthy. Honesty about yourself. Because as we said, the default position for fallen sinners is to overestimate themselves, and pride is the dominating default sin. And then secondly, I would say it's a Christ awareness. When you're overestimating your significance, your importance, your value, your competencies, you probably have been looking to compare yourself with someone less than you. Not likely Christ. But as you gaze at the glory of Christ, and as you see him for who he is, you get smaller and smaller. John the Baptist said, he must increase and I must decrease. And then it's also a view of God. Like Isaiah 6. Isaiah, who's the prophet, sees God, and having seen God, he puts a curse on himself and says he's a man with a dirty mouth and pronounces judgment on himself. So humility comes from an honest evaluation of yourself and a true vision of Christ and a true vision of God. And the purer your vision of yourself and your Lord and God, the more useful you become. In Jeremiah 9:23 and 24, Jeremiah wrote this, Thus says Yahweh, let not a man boast in his wisdom, let not a mighty man boast in his might, let not a rich man boast in his riches, but let him who boasts, boast in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am Yahweh, who shows loving kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth, for I delight in these things, declares Yahweh. If you're going to boast, boast in the Lord. That's what we're after here. So this is humility. But we talked about that last time, so let's go on to the next word. And the next word will be enough to occupy us for a few more minutes.